Hello and welcome to the Monday show from the Everything is Black and White podcast. I'm Andy Musgrove, joined as usual by Aaron Stokes. Thank you very much for tuning in. There was a lot to get into this week. We're going to look back on Eddie Howe's interview. Is he happy at Newcastle United? Of course, he gave an interview to the media last week while in Germany, and there are suggestions. Now, not all is well on Tyneside, but there have reportedly been clear the air talks over the weekend. But will that be enough to satisfy Eddie Howe? We'll get into that. We'll also look at Paul Mitchell's interview, Passion and Ambitious. What does it tell us about how he will fit in at Newcastle United? There's also Callum Wilson confirming my worst fears with another injury. And we ask the question, do Newcastle United need a new face in by the end of this week? We've also got plenty of questions sent in by you guys. So without further ado, let's get on with the show. Aaron, you well?
Very well. I mean, considering there's been no signings and no matches that we've been able to watch, we've got a lot to talk about. And I actually think that we're going to have quite a, what's the right word, Aggie show. I think we're going to have a bit of disagreement in this show.
Think?
Yeah, I've just got a feeling in my bones that it's going to be we're going to disagree on a lot of what we're going to talk about.
Well, we'll give the people what they want. A bit of healthy debate never hurts anyone. You had a good weekend?
Yeah, very good weekend. Nice 20k walk on Saturday.
No park run then?
No park run. I was paying for it yesterday though. You did a park run, even though you're on your holidays as well.
27 minutes, not my best.
Respectable, yeah, respectable. Good time.
3 laps.
New course as well. You know, you've got to take that into consideration.
I'm paying for it now. The back of my legs really hurting, so I might actually have to drop out of Monday Night Football night, unfortunately. And someone's just made the joke there about me being 10 minutes late here because I'm writing down the list of injured players. Well, I certainly might be able to join that list. Let's dive straight in then. On Friday, Eddie Howe faced the media, and the first few questions were all about the links to the England job and replacing Gareth Southgate. That was to be expected. And Howe, as he had to do, denied any interest in taking the England job. Again, that was expected because he couldn't very well kind of brush it off and not categorically say he's not interested, because we'd had managers just that week, Ange down at Tottenham Hotspur categorically ruling himself out. Eddie Howe had to do the same, or everything would blow up in Newcastle United's faces if he didn't. But he did, thankfully. So if he just ended the interview there,
yeah,
I would have been like,
the
really
world
happy.
would have been rosy.
I would have gone to bed quite happy on Friday night. But he didn't. And what came next was not expected. Eddie Howe, off his own back, threw down a warning to Newcastle United's owners, which essentially read to many as "back me or I'm going to go." I'll read you a couple of quotes now, just to remind you guys of what he said. He said, "As long as I have certain things for me, as in I'm happy, I'm allowed to work in the way I need to work in order to get the best out of me, I feel supported, then that will never change. There's absolutely no point in me saying I'm happy staying at Newcastle if the dynamic isn't right. I'm certainly not serving Newcastle well if I do that." Now, this appeared to have come out of nowhere, but on the back of the appointments of Paul Mitchell as sporting director, maybe James Bunn's coming in as well. And it led to questions over where the power will lie. We discussed it last week. Where does the influence lie? Now, today it's been reported that there's been clear the air talks, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But I have to say, Aaron, when I heard what Howe had to say, it left me unsettled, and it didn't paint a very good picture.
You were left quite rattled, the right word, by it. You were unhappy with it, weren't you? You were taken aback by it.
As a Newcastle United fan, even with these clear the air talks that have reportedly been held, I'm still quite uncomfortable, and I'm not a better man. But if you were asking me to put a percentage of how comfortable I feel as a Newcastle United fan with no inside knowledge, just a gut instinct, if you were going to ask me to put a percentage on how being in charge at the start of the season, it's not as high as I think you might put on. Maybe it's not as high as many of our listeners and viewers might have it. I don't know. I just feel a little bit uneasy.
I take a slightly different view from the comments that Howe made, and one thing I will say is that we sat in the office, didn't we, last week, and said, if on Thursday was it, we said, if he doesn't come out tomorrow and say I don't want the England job, it's going to cause quite a bit of ruffling of feathers. And actually, he came out and said he doesn't want the England job, and still those feathers have been ruffled. Now, what I will say on the Howe comments, I think personally he's used a little bit of the uncertainty behind the scenes to maybe his advantage. I don't know whether it's to get more say on transfers. I don't know whether it's to get more say on the recruitment, whether it's the fact that Mitchell's came in with a track record of having a say on how teams play. I don't know what it is. But I don't see it as this big negative as you do. I think actually Howe should have that say, and Howe will make Mitchell better, and Mitchell will make Howe better. I don't want these to be at odds. And actually, I think him coming out and saying it and putting it out there on the record in such a way, has probably led to these, clear the air talks over the weekend. It's probably let everybody put it out on the table, and hopefully, it's going to actually work as a positive, not a negative.
I don't know. If it was me, I don't think I would have put it out there to the public. That's just me, because I think it puts everyone on edge. I think it's a very bold move from Eddie Howe. I think it's a bit of a gamble, but he clearly had a plan, and that was to get it out into the open that he wants the reassurances about the role and the influence of others. You do genuinely think it's a gamble that he's taken, and it's a gamble that's paid off?
I think, I wrote about this yesterday, I think you can describe it in a lot of ways. I think it's bold and I think it's risky, but I also think it's quite commendable. I personally don't think...
It's not very Howe-esque, is it?
It's not very Howe-esque. It's very unusual. And I think, speaking to our colleague Kieran Kelly, who was in the room in Germany on Friday, he came out with saying, we've never seen Eddie Howe like this. And I think... I haven't actually watched all three, but from what you hear and what you gather, Howe was a little bit more restrained with the BBC, and he was a little bit more restrained with Sky, and those interviews happened after he spoke to the pool. And I don't know whether he maybe thought, okay, maybe I've gone a little bit too far there. I don't have any big problem with Eddie Howe saying it. Yes, it's a gamble to say it in public, and I think if the season doesn't start well, and let's just say Howe is, God forbid, out before Christmas, I think they'll point back to this interview as being maybe the beginning of the end. But it could also go the other way, and it could really act as a positive. Is it just maybe a little bit of a message to the board, to Eales, to Mitchell? I've lost two big key allies in the fact that Staveley and Gadusi have gone. I've had very little say on a sporting director coming in. I've got a sporting director and a director of performance now coming in and taking aspects of my job that I've previously had a lot of control over. Do not take me for granted because I'll go. It's a gamble, but I think it's also commendable from Howe.
I think a lot of people might ask the question of how we got to that point where Eddie Howe felt it necessary to have to air those views in public. I know Paul Mitchell hasn't been in the job that long. I know everyone's kind of just come back to Tyneside in the last couple of weeks, so maybe they've not had the time to sit down and talk about it. And there's various reports that Eddie Howe found out pretty much 24 hours before Paul Mitchell was confirmed. He had nothing to do with that appointment, which you could argue is actually probably the right way. You don't want a yes man coming in. You want someone who's going to tell you when it's going badly. You want someone who's going to be honest with you. But regardless of how we got Paul Mitchell coming in without any Eddie Howe's influence, I think there probably is a question to why Eddie Howe felt he had to air it in public. Why hadn't that conversation with Paul Mitchell, with Darren Eales happened before? They've been in Germany a couple of days. Why hadn't they sat down around the table at breakfast and had that out before they knew how it was going in front of the media?
But I think it's very deliberate that he's done it in public, and I think it's to really ram home the message. I think it's a lot stronger coming out in public than it is in private around a table with them all. And I think there's no excuses now for the board, because Howe can turn around and say, look, I said I wanted these assurances, and we're X months down the line and it hasn't happened. So just to zoom out a little bit, let's try and focus on the positives of it a little bit. Yes, on the face of it, people are saying, look, there could be loggerheads. Howe's maybe, trying to regain some of that territory that he thinks he's lost. But by all accounts, this partnership could still work. There's still very positive things being said behind the scenes. You've got Eddie Howe talking here about Mitchell, saying, I bumped into him a couple of times when we were working on the South Coast, but nothing more than that. I hope I can build a good relationship, making the right decisions for the club. The early signs are very promising, and he's the right person to lead the club forward. His passion, makes good decisions, and he's a good decision maker. He also said at the BBC, I think he said now standing sporting director, and I think it's a very, very good decision from the club. So yes, it looks maybe from the outside that, Howe maybe feels a little bit threatened, maybe he's a bit unhappy with Mitchell, but actually you dive a little bit further in the interview, and you know, he's clearly very happy that someone of Mitchell's pedigree's there. I think the battle lines are just being drawn. I think, as Lee Ryder said on one of our videos the other day, the line in the sand is being drawn, and Howe's making sure that he's not out the loop, he's not sidelined. He still wants as much control as he can get behind the scenes.
I agree. There's massive potential for this to work and work really well for Newcastle United. You've got one of the best young English managers in the game in Eddie Howe, and then you've got one of the best sporting directors in the game in Paul Mitchell. You chuck in James Bunce there. You've got really the recipe for success. And I have to say, Eddie Howe's interview on Friday. Look, I'm naturally pessimistic, so I accept that everyone will be feeling like I was when I read the quote. But it was a real shame from my point of view in many ways, because I'd watched Paul Mitchell and his interview on the Thursday night with Newcastle TV, and I was super impressed. You know, he spoke very well, passionate for all aspects of the club, including the women's side, which I think is great, excellent to see. But more than anything, it was Mitchell basically saying that Eddie Howe was one of the reasons he took the job. And he said, we know each other and have a tremendous amount of respect. I see our philosophy as being a natural collaboration, and it was something that was one of the motivations to come here. I think it's going to be tremendously successful, if I'm honest. You see Eddie's qualities. He's already impressive on the grass. You can see his player development CV. That fits nicely with my recruitment CV. We recognise a player has performance potential, but then you can extract that potential through great coaching and great technical sessions every single day. I think that collaborative approach brings together his strengths and mine, and I can only see a positive outcome to that. So when I heard that on Thursday, I thought, brilliant. Any fears that anyone's got about Eddie Howe, maybe not accepting Paul Mitchell, or any fears he's got, listen to that interview and everything will be rosy. And then Friday came along and put me right back in my place. But just on Mitchell himself, you know, that's massive, isn't it? Going out there and saying, Eddie Howe, essentially, I'm here for him.
100%. And for someone like Mitchell, who could have realistically taken any job in the world he wanted, his standing was that high after the last couple of years. For him to come and say, you know, Eddie Howe was a big reason that I joined this club, it's a huge vote of confidence for Howe as well, you know, as well as looking very, very good at fans listening and watching to him say those words.
Do you not feel, though, again, we don't know how any of these guys are thinking, but if I was in that position of Paul Mitchell and I hear what Eddie Howe's just said to the media, I might be a little bit put out. I'm literally 100 yards away. Why haven't you just come and knocked on my door and said, look, let's get this thrashed out now? Again, it's just the whole public aspect of it. I get why he's done it, because it forces the issue.
Well, that's the main thing for me, I think. But that's why he's done it.
I do have a slight concern that when you've gone down that route and you've forced the hand of the ownership to have clear the air talks, as has reportedly got on, and I got his assurance now over, you know, recruitment. He won't be forced to take a player on, and it seems the owners are determined to get everyone singing off the same hymn sheet, which is brilliant. But I do wonder, once you've gone down that route, when you've aired your frustrations in person, can you ever really come back from that? Can Eddie Howe ever really be satisfied by what he's told? Now, really, we'll only know in a few months' time when those words become actions.
Well, yeah.
But can Eddie Howe ever 100% be satisfied with reassurances from the ownership?
But if those words become actions in the next few months, why wouldn't you be? I mean,
that's why we've got to hope that does, you know, move into that.
No, there's no doubt going to be teething problems. Look, you've got a huge presence in Mitchell coming into the club. He will have a say in 7 or 8 or 9 different aspects of the club. He will take some of that control that Eddie Howe has loved having away from Howe. And I think Howe, as I've mentioned earlier, is just trying to make sure he doesn't lose too much of that. You know, you look at clubs like Chelsea, you know, hiring a manager like Enzo Maresca, who is probably just have been told, you are here to coach those players. We've got guys to take care of recruitment. We've got guys to take care of injuries. You just need to get them performing on the pitch. Eddie Howe doesn't want that. And I also don't think that should be the structure. You know, Eddie Howe should have a say on recruitment. He should have a say in stuff like this. And as you touched on, if he's been told with 24 hours or 48 hours notice that Mitchell's coming in, or he's also bringing, you know, James Bunce, who he worked with in Monaco, you know, it's no wonder Howe is feeling like that, I think. You see, you're grimacing. You're still not convinced.
I agree that Howe deserves to have that influence that you talk about. A lot of people say, well, you know, this is what happens with big clubs. You have this kind of structure in place, and managers need to get used to it. But I agree, you know, Eddie Howe has a proven track record of signing good players, and he has the right to have players that he wants in his side. Otherwise, what is the point? I just go back to my original point. It sounds daft because we're journalists and we want the manager to speak to us. I just don't know if airing it in public was the right way to go about it. Now, look, if the Clear the Air talks have come about because he's aired it in public, then he's got what he wants. But part of me does just wonder whether, even if it's just a tiny bit, is something being damaged that's you can't replace it, you can't repair it because of that interview on Friday. I mean, again, that's just me being pessimistic, but I just think sometimes these things are better said behind closed doors and away from the media, because therefore everything, these things don't get out, and you can be honest and you can be brutal with each other and you can have arguments, but no one knows what's gone on. I mean, and I think also, if you're the FA and you've seen Eddie Howe he's categorically ruled himself out. He doesn't want the job because he's happy in Newcastle. It's all about Newcastle. But also, if you really want Eddie Howe, now you've watched him say what he said, and even with Clear the Air talks, go and have a little word in his ear, his agency, and say, oh, well, how sure are you that Newcastle actually mean what they say?
But I feel like, in terms of England anyway, that England don't look like they're going to wait for, to hire someone. They want someone in soon. Apparently, the deadline for any candidates to get their intentions in is the 2nd of August. I don't think we'll fully see this play out with Newcastle and Howe and Mitchell and the ownership and Eels till at least September, until at least the transfer window's over. Then we'll know whether Howe got his targets. We'll know, what they've actually managed to do in recruitment. We suspect that they'll obviously hopefully have 3 or 4 players through the door then. So I just think I think the timing might be a little bit wrong for England. I think if this has happened a month ago, before the Euros, and then Southgate leaves, maybe. But I just think, look, we're nearly 20 minutes into this podcast, and I cannot believe we haven't actually spoken about what Howe said about the England job. That just shows how much it was flipped on its head on Friday, because that's all we thought we were going to talk about. But I think, just going on to those quotes about what Howe said about England, I think he made it pretty clear before he started talking about Mitchell and, all this sort of message to the board stuff. I think he made it pretty clear that at this stage of his career, he has no sort of urge to take the England job. And I think I'd be so surprised if he's England manager next month or in 2 months' time.
I'd be less surprised.
After Friday.
Because I was adamant last week, not a chance. 10 years' time, 100% it'd be fantastic. But I'd be less surprised now. Again, that's just my gut instinct.
But have you got the quotes that he made about England? Or should I get them up? Because I feel like
I'm going to read a few comments here that we've got live on YouTube. Thank you for joining. Hit thumbs up on the YouTube. Gary says, my take, I'm not worried about Howe's interview being some big changes behind the scenes, which also means changes to how the club is run and structured. Howe just airing his uncertainty. Graham says, Eddie has been magic for us and deserves the link to the ultimate job as an Englishman. Should he go, I'd genuinely be happy for him, so long as Pochettino replaces him. Yes, show Eddie our support, but nothing lasts forever. You got the quotes?
I've got some quotes here. The first set, and again, this just goes to show how complex the interview was and how weird it must have been being sat in front of Howe, because in one breath he's saying, it's an unbelievable football club, Newcastle. I'm very, very proud to be the manager. I love the supporters. I love the players. I love the staff. So really, there has been no thought in my mind on anything else. I've been very committed to the job here. He then does go on to say, as long as I'm happy and feel supported and I feel free to do the work that I love, I'll be very happy. But then in the next breath he goes, and I am very happy. So you're sort of on this, you're sort of on a waltzer and you're going from side to side, and it just seems like the interview was absolutely all over the place.
He's ruled himself out.
He has ruled himself out, but not. He's also sort of left the door sort of slightly open.
That's what I mean. If the interview had ended there without the rest of the quotes coming about dynamics changing at Newcastle and what have you, I think the FA would have gone, okay, we would have gone, okay, let's look ahead to the new season. But with then what was said afterwards, and I'm not saying this is Eddie Howe's intention whatsoever, but what it does dangle that carrot in front of the FA, and it just leaves that little bit of doubt and a little bit of hope that if the FA do want him, they can go and persuade him that that is the job for him.
But also, if you're someone from the FA and you've sat down to listen to this Howe interview, surely something like this, where he says, I think England is a very special job for someone, very patriotic, and I'm not ashamed to say that. I love my country and I want them to do well. I was gutted for Gareth and the lads. But I don't have that job like a burning sensation in me that I have to do it at some stage. If it happens at some stage in the future, then it's to be. If not, then I'm very, very happy in my current role, the day-to-day management. I had this situation a lot at Bournemouth in my second spell, but I was very, very happy in my environment, in my day-to-day workings.
He sounds like a man who loves club football.
He sounds like a man who, at 46 years old, who has had taken Newcastle United on a fantastic journey, which does not feel over yet. Why would you want to then take a step out? Yes, it's England. It's a huge job. I'm not going to say otherwise. It would take a lot to turn that down. But surely he's not going to want to leave Newcastle at the stage of the journey because a sporting director's came in that he might not get on with.
Well,
surely not.
The comments suggest potentially otherwise.
No, I read those. The England comments at least as I do not want the England job right now to replace Gareth Southgate.
We have to say that, at least from my point of view, I can't speak for you, Owen, but I do hope that these clear the air talks have worked because, as we've said there, the recipe is there to be very successful. And I would really like to see Eddie Howe be the man to end Newcastle United's trophy drought. A fantastic coach, and he deserves the opportunity to make it work at Newcastle United. We've got some more quotes here from Paul Mitchell. He talks about a 5-year plan. He says, I think it takes time. At some points on the journey over the next 5 years, we're going to have to rely on a level of patience. I know that is a hard thing to ask for, but it is important to understand that we are on a journey. It will take time. We've got some great elements that make me super excited and have been drivers to my decision, the coach being one. I think in 5 years, I think we can really challenge for important things at an important level. And that's what we need to do. We have had ambition and we need to plot a strategy over time to get that. Not just get there, the Champions League once every 5 years, but get there every year and put Newcastle on the global map. We want our name and brand on the tip of everyone's tongue. That's my big driver, is to really establish us in the global game in the right way. Even Newcastle United fan, you read those quotes. Of course, as we always say, the proof is in the pudding. We need action to follow the words. But those words for a first statement, for a first interview, you can't help but be excited.
Yeah, well, I mean, Mitchell came in and, he already had a lot of fanfare around him. And then we all sort of heard that interview on Thursday, and it just feels like he said all the right things. The tone came across perfectly. He feels like he gets the club. He spoke about being a northern lad, wanting to come back to England for the right project after, having a couple of years at Monaco. Everything he said struck the right chord, and I think you'd be very hard pressed to find anybody who watched that or listened to it and didn't come away with it very, very impressed and excited about what Mitchell can do, if I guess he's allowed to do it.
Well, it'd be so interesting to know what he was told in the interviews, what his score would be. I know he's spoken about it with the interview with Newcastle Club TV, but it'd be really interesting to see if it matches up to what Eddie Howe's now been told in these clear the air talks, because for this to work, both of them have to be happy.
Yeah.
100%. And obviously the influence is the big sticking points. And is there enough to do? Is there enough to do to make them both happy? Can they work together?
Yeah, surely. I mean, look, Paul Mitchell, one of the most experienced figures in the game in this type of role. He's worked with countless managers at countless different environments, and he's always seemed to get the best out of the clubs himself. It might just be a little shock to the system to Howe, who's had, very little change behind the scenes at Newcastle since he took the club. He's had his backroom staff brought in from Bournemouth. He's had Dan Ashworth in from very early. As I mentioned, he's had Staveley and Gudusi, big champions for him. Eels, big champion for him. And all of a sudden, in one summer, three big assets have gone. 2 new ones have came in with maybe little say from him. Might just be a little shock to the system.
And I guess with Dan Ashworth, it was widely accepted that he was not in the inner circle of Eddie Howe, but it does seem that Paul Mitchell's going to, at least they want him to be a little bit more involved. They do want him working a lot closer to Howe than Ashworth did. Now, again, that might present a bit of a sticking point, because clearly Howe didn't want that influence of Ashworth to lie too heavy on top of him, but here you might not actually have a choice.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, as you say, I think we'll know more further down the line, and rather than trying to get bogged down in the negatives, there's a lot of positives to take from Howe's interview, from Mitchell's interview, from what they said about each other. There's no reason it can't work. I think it will work, but I think we won't know, until a good way down the line whether it actually is or not.
Does it just increase the pressure on Eddie Howe a little bit? And not just Eddie Howe, Paul Mitchell as well. We know it's a big summer, so there's going to be eyes on him. Given what Newcastle United need to achieve in the new season, the need European football for the season after, there was already talk about how how the first 10 games have got to go. Given his frustrations that he aired, does it increase that pressure a little bit more?
Yeah, I think so. And I think one negative about airing that in public the other day is that it just ramps up the pressure on everyone, including Howe, because questions will be asked now down the line. How's it going with Paul Mitchell? How is the new system working for you? How do you feel? Has too much control been taken away from you?
Well, that's the next time he sits in front of the media, which it might be after the whole game.
Maybe Japan. You suspect you'll hear from him then.
So let's say anyway, it's 5-6 days after they've held these so-called clear the air talks. The first thing that's going to be on the agenda, if they haven't signed a new player, which we'll talk about in a moment, it'll be what was said to you about Paul Mitchell.
What was said in these
talks.
That's
the other thing. You can see pick out the positives, and there were positives. I mean, we've talked about how impressed we were about Paul Mitchell's interview, and there were positives, of course, in the Eddie Howe one. But the thing that sticks in your mind and will stick in the mind of fans and journalists until the next bigger news agenda comes on and pushes it out the way is Eddie Howe's frustrations at the setup.
Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. And as I say, that is the negative of why he's done it. In terms of the pressure, I think, we spoke about, Manchester United winning that FA Cup final ramped up the pressure on Eddie Howe, because if he doesn't have a good start to the season, especially with the changes they've made behind the scenes now, where they've got a little bit ruthless this summer, Newcastle. The Saudis have got a bit ruthless. So it ramps up the pressure. And also the fact that we're sat here 22nd of July, yes, people are saying Newcastle have signed 4 players, but let's be honest, they haven't spent any big money yet. That's what everyone's waiting for. And I think it adds pressure to that now. One, in terms of the timing, how quickly can they get these players through the door? I mean, just the other day, Eddie Howe, speaking in Germany, said we still have quite a bit to do on the outfield side of the squad. We've still got a hangover of injuries, so we need to add players. The timing is massive. They need to get players through the door. As we keep saying, they need that big positive boost, which we thought we'd get Friday when he shut down the England job. And actually, we've got more questions than answers. And also the type of player, the standing of player. They need to go out and get somebody who's got, big name pedigree. They've got to go out and spend a bit of money. They've got to go and upgrade either at right wing. They've got to go out and get a new centre back. They've got to go out and sign a striker, something that just eases that pressure a little bit.
Because if they do that this week, which is going to be easier said than done, then everyone forgets about what Howe said last Friday. Because that new signing comes in and picks everybody up. Does it need to happen this week? Does it need to happen before they go to Japan?
I mean, ideally, yes. And obviously, Howe's made no secret of the fact he's always wanted players in before they go away on these trips. He would have loved to have a couple more in Germany, especially given the fact that, Lloyd Kelly's been gradually eased, into game time. He wasn't really used much in Germany, even though he was took across there. They need to get somebody in before Japan, ideally. If not, definitely before the Stella Cup, definitely before the start of the season.
We've always been very impressed with the way the club go about their transfers. They have a list and they stick to that list. If they don't get someone who's at number 1, they'll go after 2, 3, and then maybe revisit. We saw it with Botman. They don't tend to deviate. But do you think that the plans have been somewhat disrupted by the manoeuvring in the boardroom with Amanda Staveley, Midad Gusi, with the arrival of Paul Mitchell coming in? Do you think that's had some influence?
Yeah, absolutely, because you've lost 3 key decision makers in the space of a couple of weeks. Now, Dan Ashworth obviously hasn't been involved with the club for a long time. So the transfer recruitment side of it was already scuppered because you didn't have that director of football there. And you had other backroom staff like, Steve Nixon and Andy Howe sort of leading the way on that. Mitchell coming in now will have his own ideas. Obviously, that is why he and Howe need to sit down and say, actually, who's it going to work? Howe needs to make his feelings clear, where he wants to strengthen, what type of player he wants to bring in. and then they can, start to get to work. I mean, Mitchell's been in the job less than a week, but you suspect they'll have already had all these conversations about who comes in, how much they can spend, even though Howe still insists that the budget is very fluid and they don't sort of had a set price tag on it. But it definitely has affected the summer, and I think, in a parallel world where Dan Ashworth was still at the club and Amanda Staveley and Kadusi were still there, I've no doubt there would already be more signings through the door at this stage of the summer.
We've got a few questions that were sent in over Twitter, so we're going to read a couple out, and we will get through all of them and the ones that were sent in as well. If you ever want to get in touch, you can do by sending an email to the EIBWpodcast@reachplc.com. I'm going to ask you this question from David Stratton, who says, do you think the current crop of players gets us a top 4 finish? I don't,
but I'm gonna caveat it a little bit by saying I think that squad at the start of last summer was actually probably good enough to get top 4. Obviously, that is in an ideal world with no injuries. But I think when you look at some of the teams around Newcastle now that are strengthening, Chelsea have spent big money, Villa have spent big money, Brighton have spent 75 million on 4 talents. So, and I also think Newcastle now, the squad's looking a bit different. They still need that upgrade at right wing. They still need a backup striker. So
I think there's a
5th, 6th. I think the squad with no injuries with a good season, but I think they need 1 or 2 more bits of quality.
I think it's a top 6, as in I think 5th might be a bit out of reach with just this squad, but I think 6th, 7th, that's where the squad definitely needs to be, like I say, without any injuries and luck on their side. But it's not a top 4 squad without additions. Without
let's dive into the ideal starting 11. Pope and net. You would probably say Tino or
without a shadow of a doubt, Livramento.
Cher, and obviously, Botman's not going to be fit. So let's say Cher and Kelly, left back. I was saying Lewis Hall. I was saying Dan Burn.
Do you know what? Could you see Lloyd Kelly at left back?
Potentially.
It's funny because the Bournemouth guy I spoke to sees him more as a left back. So maybe Fabian Cher and Dan Burn.
Yeah, okay.
But that leaves you with a lack of pace.
But let's just for the basis of the start 11, we'll say that's the back 5. We'll go Kelly left back, Burn and Cher and Tino.
New right winger.
Yeah, so we're in agreement. It's Tonali, Bruno, and Joel Manola fit and able to play.
Yes.
They need a new right winger, but let's just say it's Miggy, Gordon, Isak. That 11, top 4.
I think depth where the issue is.
Yeah. Well, I don't even think it's a depth. I think you probably need a better centre half. You probably need a better left back for the top 4, and I think you probably need you definitely need a better right winger. So, look, they need. Everyone's in agreement. They need players through the door. They need fresh faces, and every summer so far since the takeover, they've had this big, huge marquee signing. Tonali last year. I know obviously it didn't go to plan, but they spent big money, exciting capture. Alexander Isak the season before. You're just waiting for that one that's really going to sort of like the touch paper.
I asked you this question last week, and you said you weren't worried. We're now a week on. Are you worried that Newcastle United haven't signed a big marquee signing as of yet?
No, because I'm confident it will happen. So I wouldn't say I'm worried, but I think am I maybe getting a little bit restless? I don't think I'm as restless as you yet. I think you're eager, aren't you? You're really, really keen for. Or would you say you're more worried?
I mean, ideally, I would have liked to have seen 2 probably in by now. I think that would have been ideal to let Eddie Howe really work with him, because the season is less than a month away, isn't it? But this is football. Like we said, they've had the change in the boardroom. They've brought in the new sporting director. You can understand maybe why things haven't gone as quickly as people like. You've had the Euros as well to add in another delay. I'm confident like you will come. But if we're sitting here this time next week and we're no closer, then I do think a lot of people will be a little bit more nervous than they are now.
I think we just need something concrete and real to grab onto. We just need a little bit of excitement. And I actually think, yes, they've got a lot of positions that they need to strengthen. They'll have ideas for a couple. But I think if you go out and get a right winger this week, the pressure lifts massively because you've needed one for 3 years. Let's be honest. Since the takeover, everybody said Miggy could have lost his place there and then, and he hasn't. And I think if they can go out, spend a bit of money, get a good, exciting goal-scoring winger in before Japan, around Japan, the pressure on everyone lifts, the fans' moods lifted. You're feeling a lot more upbeat about the prospects of the season. But as you say, with a lot of upheaval behind the scenes, that this summer with big names leaving, Mitchell coming in, I'm not surprised that we're at this stage.
I think when one comes in, that's when
Get
you'll
the
see.
ball
I
rolling.
don't think it'll just be one. I think you'll in quick succession you'll get maybe 2 or 3, and hopefully by the time Southampton rock up at St James's Park, Newcastle United, and Eddie Howe will have at least 2 additions to add to the squad. Ryan says the Eddie interview seemed messy. Why not have the meeting and conversation with him, i.e. Mitchell, beforehand, or I guess with Eddie, to set the boundaries and give him assurances, as it would have avoided the whole issue. I agree with Ryan on that one.
You've mentioned that.
Alex says, I want to know more about Paul Mitchell. The more I look into it, it seems there are a lot of power in transfers, and clearly Howe is holding the cards close to his chest until he finds out what his plans are. From his track record, what kind of signings do you think he goes for?
Well, it's funny that Alex should ask that, because I actually wrote a piece about this last week. Anybody who knows anything about Paul Mitchell, will go straight to his transfer record. Fantastic at Tottenham and Southampton, very, very good at Monaco, and also very good at Leipzig. Now, to give you some examples, he was the man who brought Sadio Mane to Southampton for 10 million, Wanyama for 12 million, Dusan Tadic for 11 million, and Graziano Pella for 8 million. Good signings under Poch and Koeman. He went to Tottenham and signed Kieran Trippier for 3.5 million. Tottenham beat Newcastle under Mitchell to Dele Alli for 5 million. And he also brought a little-known player called Son Heung-min to the Premier League when he was at Tottenham. Good signings at Leipzig. Your man, Tyler Adams, he signed him there. He's clearly got a good eye. He also signed Mateus Cunha, who's now at Wolves, and Dani Olmo, who had a fantastic Euros with Spain. And he also signed Christopher Nkunku, who's now at Chelsea from PSG. And at Monaco, he signed Axel Disasi, who's again now at Chelsea, and Breel Mbolo, the Switzerland striker. So he also played a big part in Tchouaméni, the centre mid, who ended up signing for Monaco for 70 million and going to Real Madrid 2 seasons later for 85 million. So really good track record. Everywhere he's been, as I said, the levels have been elevated. He's had some really, really good, solid transfer moves. He's got a very good eye for scouting and signing players.
How do you see it working? Will it be anyhow knock on the door and saying, I need this position filled? Paul Mitchell and the scouting staff go away and they have a look and they say, okay, here's a list of 10 names. Tell me which one you want, and then we'll go and pick up the phone. I think
that's pretty much bang on. I think again, this goes back to why Howe wanted it out in the public last week, because he wants that say, and he's saying to Mitchell, I still need to have a hand in this. Yes, you've got a fantastic track record, but I want these players that I'm going to have to coach day in, day out.
What happens if Eddie Howe's choice isn't on that list?
No, but I think the way you've put it is probably right. I think Howe will say, look, I need a centre-back who's right-footed, who can pass the ball about, and Mitchell then go away and have a short list. And Howe might even say, what about this guy?
Someone like him. Interested to see how it's all going to work. We'll get back into the questions in a moment. Paul Mitchell also spoke about James Bunce. He said, something that has been well documented is injury prevention and the amount of injuries around the first team. It is something that Eddie wanted to address, the organisation ownership wanted to address. My job is to go and find the best in class. We need to put that, i.e. the injury list, right. If we want to perform well, we need to give our best players accessibility to the coach. The way we do that is by keeping them fit, healthy, resilient, and robust, so our coach has a chance of winning on match day. James is an elite specialist in performance. And again, when I initially heard these quotes for the first time, the fact he was talking about Bunce doing the work, which then gives Eddie Howe as much time as possible with the players to work with them when they're, super duper fit. I was like, yes, that's exactly what we want. This is exactly how it should be working. So I'm really enthused by Paul Mitchell's words there on how James Bunce is going to fit into this triple threat. Are you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think again, we've spoke so much about Mitchell's record, but actually, if you look at Bunce's record, when he went into Monaco, they had a real problem with injuries to the point where the manager at the time was only having 12 or 13 players to work with, and he did absolute wonders with it. Now I think we've probably for a year now, well, maybe less than a year, we've had people saying, will they address the injury record in the summer? Can they even address it? Is it just a fluke thing? They've clearly gone out and said, we need somebody in to address why we had so many injuries last year to make sure it doesn't happen again. And I think, Bunce's comments when he came in, my role will be to ensure that we push in every area of performance and medicine to optimize the health, fitness, and well-being of players. After such a ridiculous season last year, it seems like they're just the perfect appointment, doesn't it?
One query I've got about James Bunce, and again, this goes back to how it'll all work with Howard Mitchell, is the Callum Wilson debate, the Callum Wilson debacle, whatever you want to call it. He's picked up another injury. He's now a doubt to be available for the first game of the season. Newcastle United, as I said last week, cannot gamble on Callum Wilson's fitness because to gamble, they're just inevitably going to lose. What happens then with James Bunce's role in that scenario with Callum Wilson? Does he put in all his resource, all his effort, and just trying to get Callum Wilson to 25 games in a season, let alone 38? And does he try and find that remedy? And if he can't, then what happens? Does he go to Paul Mitchell? Does he go to Eddie Howe and say, I'm sorry, he's a lost cause? And then what happens if Eddie Howe says, I don't care, I want to keep him? Does that then present a bit of an issue?
It's a big hypothetical, though, isn't
No,
it?
but,
I mean, you've jumped through a lot of hoops there, though.
But do you not think that's going to come down the road at some point? We've discussed for months, if not in the last couple of years, especially in my view, that Callum Wilson is probably the end of his time at Newcastle United. But we know that Eddie Howe wants to keep him because, let's be honest, he's one of the best finishers in the Premier League when fit. But that always comes with a bit of a warning, i.e. when fit. Hardly ever. And again, he's going to miss the start of the season, which is detrimental to Newcastle United. At some point, there's going to be a tough conversation where someone comes and says, look, we've been offered 10 million for Callum. We're going to cash him because he's not going to be worth anything in a year's time. Picks up another injury, he's going to be worth even less. At what stage is how kind of say, look, I want to keep him. I know how good he is. I trust him, but I have to accept that he's not good enough, and I have to cash in. And if he doesn't get to that stage, is that when Bunce and Mitchell have to force the issue? I do think the Callum Wilson issue is going to be. I think it's going to be it might be a big sticking point for all three of them. Again, we're guessing how the influence and where the impact works and how all three of them work together. But
I know what you're getting at.
And we want to be realistic about Callum Wilson. If someone comes in with £10 million, that's enough.
And there's nothing, by the way, to say that Howe, hasn't came out in the same school of thought. That, I mean, yes, he's said very publicly and behind the scenes that he wants to keep Wilson, but he must even Howe, his biggest supporter now, must know that it's getting to the point of being, it's starting to actually sound ludicrous to keep him if an offer of that bid comes in, because at this stage, who would take the punt on him? Another injury. So yeah, look, yeah, I know what you're getting at, but I think also just yes, I've just spent the last hour saying Howe should have a lot more control. I also think Bunce and Mitchell, big clubs will operate with these experts in their field making the calls as well. It can't all be on Howe. Howe can't run everything. And if Bunce is saying, look, I think Callum Wilson's a lost cause, then that needs to be taken into consideration. He's not going to get his own way every time, Eddie Howe, is he?
Do you think he will? Do you think there's going to be compromise on both sides?
Yeah, I think there will. Look, Friday's comments seem scary because they were unexpected and, they're very sort of ominous. But I think, zoom out, look at what they've said about everything. All three are very experienced operators. They all want one thing, and that's for Newcastle United to succeed. There will be give and take. I've got absolutely no concerns about it.
Okay, we will get back into the comments. We have Julie saying, I think there need to be a few meetings to iron things out for the good of the club. I can understand that Eddie has been upset, but I do think he should have say on players. He coaches them in the system that should be discussed. We don't want disruption. After all, Eddie is outstanding. I'm going to dive into the email now because we've got quite a few questions sent in this morning, which is always great to have. Just a reminder of the email address. It's the EIBWpodcast@reachplc.com. We've got a question here from Charlie Vincent. Morning, lads. Massive fan of the pod. Listening all the way over in New Zealand. Love the Monday show. I think you should have Aaron on more. Really puts a foot wrong.
Oh, Charlie, I'll send that tenner over New Zealand in the post. Don't you worry.
Can someone please explain to me why people want Callum Wilson gone from the club?
Oh,
Granted, his injury record isn't amazing, but he guarantees goals when he plays. 9 goals from 20 games last year, 18 from 31 the year before. To replace that, you're going to be spending a huge chunk of the budget to play second fiddle. He's criminally underrated because of his injuries. We 100% need to keep him. Bring in some youth to develop, and they will get chances. We'll all be celebrating when his goals fire us to the Champions League.
I think, and I mean, look, I've said all summer, haven't I? And I feel like maybe with every injury or illness or ailment that Wilson has, I feel like I lose less faith. I lose less conviction about wanting to keep him. But the point still stands, and it is a point that Charlie's just made there. When fit, and I know it's a big if, when he's fit, there's very few like him. And also, he's got a remarkable ability to come back from whatever injury or illness or ailment is thrown at him and hit the ground running. What I will say, though, is, I've completely changed my mind on the debate that we had for months last season about them needing a third striker. I think they do now.
Should listen to us.
No, but back then I didn't. But things have changed now. Wilson in the last 6 months has had 3 different issues.
We're always going to get to this point, and we'll be at the point again, because I think he probably does end up staying. If I'm being totally honest,
and can I just say I'm fine with that. I'm completely fine with Wilson staying. I'm fine with it, but only if they have another striker on the books. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
you can't say. That's fine, isn't it? If Callum Wilson stays, but there's another striker in the mix with him and Isak, I'm fine with that.
I just always go back to that Brighton game and how he just knew Alexander Isak from the word go was not right, but he had no one else to put on instead of him. I just think it's a massive gamble on Callum Wilson, and it's easy to sit here and say cash in because we haven't got a buyer. So who is going to spend the money on him? Unless it's a ridiculously cheap bid, but for me, it's such a shame. But I just can't see him having an impact on next season.
Well, this is another point. I mean, Wilson's now a doubt for the opening game at Southampton in a month's time. If he isn't back for Southampton, and that injury drags on towards the first transfer deadline, Newcastle might sell him. Yeah, exactly. Newcastle might not have any option but to keep him. Now, I'd be interested to know that anybody who's watching this live on YouTube to let us know in the comments, with another Wilson injury, has your mind changed? Do you still want to keep him? Do you think he should go? Do you think what would make you cash in? Because I think, as I've just said, I think with each passing Wilson injury, I think it becomes more and more of a tide turn where larger sections of the fan base move closer towards the selling than keeping them. And I think I'm gradually into that. But they need a third striker in. They do.
Finally. Just always listen to us.
No.
Always listen to us. Graham says Wilson as a third striker makes total sense and surely easier to manage if 3 strikers. I agree in an ideal world, but he seems to get injured in training and not actually in matches.
I tell you what, if Newcastle can pull a rabbit out the hat in the transfer market, and you've got Callum Wilson as a third choice striker, it's not a bad attraction.
But you still got the issue of keeping him fit. He still has to train week in, week out, and that's why he's picking up most of their injuries. So, it's all good having that third striker, which they definitely do need. But you're still going back to Callum Wilson's fitness. And again, I say it, I'm so devastated that we're talking about it, because we should be talking about someone easily in the 100 club of the Premier League, getting so much closer to Alan Shearer's record. I mean, never breaking it, but getting much closer to it. But we're just not, because of the injuries. Stephen says, don't think we need a striker. Keep Mr. Glass, which is a little bit harsh, Stephen. Keep Callum Wilson and buy Mbeumo or Bowen. Both can play a multi-role and a striker.
Idea.
We spoke about that last week, didn't we?
Yeah.
Mbeumo would be fantastic. I think Bowen's a little bit out of reach because of his personal setup down in London, and he would cost a lot of money as well. But still young enough to definitely make an impact. Gary says, we will have another striker in or someone that can play that role before the season kicks off. The club won't go to next season risking it after last season. I agree. I hope. Leslie Chu says Jonathan David would be a great signing. He would definitely be. Marcus says I wanted to cash in on Callum Wilson since last January. Niall says I would keep Wilson and get Mbeumo as cover and then go get Sesko next summer if we get in the Champions League. There's a plan.
Like a plan.
I'm going to go back into the emails now. Thanks for that question from Charlie. We've got Tom saying, love the podcast. Listen on YouTube every episode. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much, Tom. Do you think it's more important for the manager to have 100% control of transfers, so they only sign players they want, or for the club to sign the players based upon the style and play philosophy? So if the manager leaves, you can bring in another manager to suit the style and place. Example, how having a defensive Steve Bruce squad means an entire overhaul was needed. From my point of view, I don't think 100% is the way forward. I think you always have to be listening to others. It's in any walk of life. There is no point just having an echo chamber where you get told everything's rosy and you're the best and your decisions are correct. You need someone there who can not only tell you when things are going badly, but point you in different directions, open up your eyes to different alternatives, something you might not have seen. You know, you've maybe seen more of them. So you say, oh, Eddie, look at this player. You know, I've watched him week out, week in for the last, 2 years. He's superb and he can do this and do that. Have you ever thought about this? I think that's the right route to go down. He still should have the majority of influence, because if you're talking about setting up a philosophy, then it's his philosophy. And the way Eddie Howe plays, very high press, very energetic. So he needs players that can fit that straight away, because, if there's one buckle in the system, then the whole thing collapses. So Eddie Howe definitely needs to have the majority influence and the biggest say on players, but he has to be open to names and players that he never would have thought of in a million months of Sunday.
Yeah, 100%. I wouldn't disagree with much of that. Very good question, by the way, Tom. I also think, not to give a boring answer, but also when the ownership have got the amount of money that Newcastle, hopefully should have this summer, there will be times where they want to spend it for marketing purposes, for branding purposes, because they need a big name, because they know it attracts seats, they know it attracts interest, they know it attracts TV revenue. We can't just have Eddie Howe saying, right, well, I'm going to go and pick 3 ex-Bournemouth players because, I know them and they're going to fit my style. So I actually think, that Steve Bruce example is a good one. If we give Eddie Howe 100% control of the transfers, and then in 6 months' time, Poch is in the club, it's, he's working with players that he doesn't know, he doesn't trust, might not fit his style of play. And again, it just goes back to the fact that Newcastle have now got, the best in class in Mitchell, who is going to be able to find them fantastic players, but also who can fit Howe's style of play.
The way I see it working is, as we've already said, Howe says, I want this position filled. I like this player, but, if you've got any alternatives, go out and find them. Comes back with a list, says that, this guy's shone here, he can do this, he's got huge potential. Howe sits down, maybe goes out himself and watches the player, maybe watches it on a few tapes, and then makes a decision. But I think Howe has to have the final say, most certainly, because otherwise, it does make his job a lot more difficult. But then with that comes the need for him to take responsibility for the players he signs as well.
Absolutely.
So, is a little bit give and take, but definitely Eddie Howe needs to have the final say. Thanks for that question. We've got Kieran asking, good morning, gents. Big fan of the show. My question for you is, when Eddie Howe wins us a trophy this season, yes, I'm hopeful. I'm loving that optimism, Kieran. Where does he rank in terms of top Newcastle managers? I think it's inevitable that Howe manages England at some point. How many more seasons would it be until you would be okay with him leaving the club?
Great question. Very positive.
I think that you stand a good chance of winning the cup this season. I'm feeling a little bit
optimistic. You're more positive on that front than I am.
I feel it coming.
I'm not convinced, but I hope I'm wrong.
Needs a couple more additions, or to definitely up that chance of doing so. If he wins it, where does he rank in terms of top Newcastle managers? He would go in at number 2 for me.
Really?
Yes, because at the moment he's below Keegan and Sir Boy Robson. But for me, Joe Harvey's still number one.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
He's the last man
Yeah.
to win a cup for Newcastle United. You can't look beyond that. It's a little bit like.
And you think if Howe wins a cup, he still drops below under Harvey at 2?
I think because of the longevity of Joe Harvey and what he achieved at Newcastle United, okay, he won 2 minor cups as well in that time, the Texaco Cup, and I think it was the Anglo-Italian Cup, which, nothing cups, but he still got them there, and he got them to another final, and he built 3 really impressive squads. I mean, the first squad there that was in the top flight, the squad with Malcolm MacDonald, and then there's a third squad after that. Obviously, the one that won the first cup was the first one. He built really impressive squads. He was great at signing players. He brought, when you talk about Newcastle United legends, Malcolm MacDonald, Terry Hibbert, Tony Green, he signed some of the best players his club's ever seen, and then he was here for I think it was 13 years in total. And of course, you've got his playing days as well, which will not do Howard disservice because he's not Newcastle United player back in the day, so you can't really pin that on him. But for me, you can't look past Joe Harvey. He's the last man to win a Newcastle United a cup. So Eddie Howe would be up there with them, but then he's got to go with the longevity. He's got to make sure Newcastle are a force on the top flight, and he's got to build squads that are exciting and were relatively successful without winning a cup.
You can tell you've been doing podcasts with Gibbo for 5 years when you're reeling off those stats like that.
I'm going to write a book on Joe Harvey because I think he's underrated.
You've been banging the drum for the statue, haven't you?
I don't know a statue. Get him a stand. Get that East stand named after Joe Harvey.
I don't think I disagree with any. I think he's at the minute he's just under Keegan and Robson. And yeah, I think you've got it bang on there. I think he probably slots into. Just misses out on number 1
for now because he'll win another cup and another cup. And
on the second part of the question, I agree with Kieran. I think it's inevitable that Howe does manage England. I just don't think now is the right time. How many more seasons would it be until you would be okay with him leaving the club? That's hard, isn't it? Yeah.
Because the day he leaves the club, I don't want it to come where he's been forced out or he's resigned because things haven't gone the right way. I want it to be done in terms of it's the right time to go and everyone comes to that agreement. Maybe he's won the cup and then there's a question of, okay, how do you go to that next level? And we saw the progress with Man City and how they went through loads of managers till they got to Pep. And, can Eddie Howe, avoid that? There's no reason why not. But I think the day he does go, which will happen at some point, I'd like to see it done in the nicest and best
on
way
his
possible.
own terms.
Yeah, on his
You don't want it to be another Benitez, do you? Where he's got all.
Or he feels he has to go because he's not been backed.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see him win a cup at least, if not more, and then potentially. But you just don't know, do you? I mean,
well, me and Dad could see in a Sterling spoke about him being Newcastle United's Alex Ferguson,
and everybody scoffed at that, didn't they? Really, because you thought no chance. This is the man who, I don't want to be harsh to Eddie Howe, but when he came in and his last job was failing to keep Bournemouth in the Premier League, and he came in, there was a big thing from the outside of he is going to be the man to steady the ship, keep them up, and pass the baton on. And to his credit, and to everyone at the club's credit, he has been a lot more than that. He's been so much more than that. So yeah, a good few years. Yeah, you'd have to hope.
Well,
hopefully,
Christian's not too sure on that one. So Christian's emailed in to say, how can Mitchell spend big on a right winger or right centre back when he does not know if Eddie will stay put? Do the club invest in more versatile options to suit any manager rather than Eddie's fit for purpose players? And will that result in Eddie feeling less in control and a potential conflict? Now, this question from Christian is really interesting because it's another reason why I wouldn't have gone public. Because this is what happens. People read what Eddie Howe said and are then thinking...
And they think he's going to go.
Whereas do it behind closed doors. No one knows you're unhappy. And then maybe if you don't get what you want in that instance, then do it. But don't do it how it's been done, because this then rocks the boat for fans and they think, oh, is he actually going to stay? But on the question,
I don't think you can work like that. So just to dive straight in the question, I don't think you can invest in players that you think are going to work for a manager in 6 months' time that you don't know who's going to be. You can say, yes, we'll get versatile option, but I think you need to back Howe now. And I don't think, I know we've done these quotes to death today, but I don't think that Howe is close to leaving. I don't think he wants to leave. I don't think he's got any intention of leaving. I think he's using it as a bargaining tool, and I think he's gambling essentially on forcing the board's hand. I don't think if Howe had any interest in actually leaving the club, he would be talking to England right now. I generally don't think there's any intention that he wants to go.
No, I don't either. Like I say, it was just to force the hand of the ownership, and these clear talks. If he's got what he wants, then I guess again it goes back to that question of pressure. It has to work for Eddie Howe, doesn't it? And fingers crossed it will. And look, a lot of people in the comments saying it will work, and they're confident that Eddie Howe can win a cup this season, and I'm backing that to happen. So I do feel optimistic about that. So fingers crossed that does happen. We're going to go to this question from Bonkin Juniors on Twitter. Question for the winner show.
That's
How
the same one you've just read out.
Is it? It is.
Yeah,
Oh, see,
the
look
email.
at that. Should have read that before. So that was from Christian. Well, thank you very much for sending in twice. I appreciate you emailing in it as well. Yeah, let's finish on something optimistic, shall we?
Oh, it's only taken us an hour. Go on then.
Have we got anything?
I thought you were then you were going to reel something off.
I think there'll be a signing.
I've got something optimistic.
Go on.
They won 3-1 against the German third division side.
They did. And look, some of the youngsters that were
well, yes. We should actually talk about that because for anybody who doesn't know, because the game was behind closed doors, they won 3-1 against a German third division side, which I will not try to pronounce because it's a lot of consonants and not a lot of vowels. The first half was the senior players. Isaac scored, Barnes scored, Murphy scored. And then the second half was Vlachodimos in goal, and then just 10 outfield youngsters. You had Trayvon Sanusi, who looks very, very good. You had Alfie Harrison, who obviously signed in January.
I'm excited for him.
I'm excited for him. Leo Shahart, right back, who they signed from Wolves, who looks fantastic. He's played at every level that he can for England so far. He looks very good. Kafal Heffernan, who they got from Milan, he started. Ellis Stanton, who was in Australia, he looks very good at left back. Grant Kowal, big summer for him. I think he'll go out on loan, but he will not have a better chance to prove that he's actually worth it and to become a third choice striker at Newcastle. So yeah, good to see that Howe actually took them out there and give them all a run out, and hopefully we'll see a few of them in and around the first team.
Shame we couldn't
season.
see Tonali.
Yeah,
Wasn't registered. He has to be registered with both.
both FAs. Yeah. Hopefully we'll see him in the well, we won't see him because he's only going to potentially play in those behind closed doors games, but it's whether they can get the permission for it. If not, then it's roll on September 1st and Tottenham. Tottenham at home.
Maybe the League Cup game.
Yeah, potentially, yeah.
But I mean, look, the Germany trip looked like it was a lot of fun, and everyone that was there, the players, looked very happy. Looked really happy to be back in each other's company.
Yeah.
They were laughing, they were smiling. They also obviously did a lot of hard work, put through their paces, and I think it was a good start of the pre-season.
I think it was, and we've seen from history that these warm weather trips and these training camps abroad have had a really good effect on them. You know, when they used to do them mid-season, or when they have under Howe in recent seasons, they've done very, very well when they've came back from it. I think it'll be the perfect start. As you say, a good chance for them to bond, a good chance for some of the senior stars that weren't at the Euros or the Copa America to get their first minutes under their belt. Yeah, look, very positive. And also, can we just talk about that Adidas archive at the HQ?
Some horrible tops,
yeah, if anybody hasn't seen it, Kieran Kelly, our colleague who was out in Germany over the weekend, he was given a little tour of the Adidas archive where they showed him and all the other journalists out there some of the Newcastle kits that never saw the light of day. We had a blue and orange Northern Rock kit. We had a very old black and white Granda kit. We even had a red and white brown ale kit, which I hate to say, but I actually like.
What have you made of the pretty much confirmation of the away and third kits?
I thought I would really like the away kit because I loved it when it was it Fun 88 and Puma a couple of seasons ago, you know, the one Rondon Perez season. Loved that one. Not too sure about this one. And and I think I'll have to see the third kit in person before I know.
I like the idea of an old badge on
But
it.
the badge is huge, I think, and so is the noon badge on the side.
I
So,
want to see it in person.
so yeah, I think I'll have to see them in person.
I love the whole nod to the past.
Yeah.
That's great.
But I actually, and I didn't think I'd think this, but I think the home kit might actually turn out to be the best of the three, which I didn't think I'd think. But
actually, when you look at the pictures of them playing that game in Germany, like everyone looks brilliant.
Yeah.
It's really, I think Dan Burn, there was a few pictures of Dan Burn, and he looked every bit of that world-class centre-back that he is. So the tops look really good on the players. But yes, it's going to be really interesting to get our hands on the away and third kits that should be coming out in the not-too-distant future. This has been the Everything is Black and White podcast. I'm going to finish off on a positive. The Clear the Air talks have happened. Everyone is now going to be singing off the same hymn sheet. There's going to be a signing arriving before they head off to Japan. And that's going to boost everyone's spirits.
And we're going to be sat here in a week's time, exactly a week to the day. We're going to be sat here talking about a win against Burnley behind closed doors, a win against Hull at the KC Stadium, and a big, brand spanking new signing through the door.
Yeah. Are we?
Good way to finish. It's a good way to finish.
Well, there we go. Thank you very much for tuning in. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Please give the video a thumbs up on YouTube. And if you're listening on our podcast channel, thank you as always. Do leave us a rating and a review. Really helps us get the show out to a bigger and wider audience, which means we can keep doing it as often as we do and for free. And if you are watching on YouTube, hit subscribe on the channel. A massive 70% of you guys don't subscribe to it just yet. And for the same reasons I've just mentioned, it means we can continue to do it as often as we do and without making it costing you guys anything at all. So thank you very much for your time. Do head over to chroniclelive.co.uk. And for myself and Aaron, we'll see you guys next Monday.